Hi everyone, this is Catching Up with the Nerds with your hosts Tom and JC and our special guest David. This is a podcast about two dads that are catching up on all the nerdy stuff we miss, sharing how we pass on our nerdy passions to our kids, and deep diving into nerd pop culture to make it more accessible for you listeners. Welcome back, everyone.
Hello.
Hey.
Yeah, how's everyone doing?
All right.
Good. Sun is out.
Sun is out.
Yeah. Same here. Like days getting longer, so nice.
Beautiful.
I know.
So should we do
soon. Yep.
quick intros? David, you want to kick us off?
Sure. My name is David Sago. I am a podcast producer and host. I host my own podcast called the Grit and Grind Basketball Podcast, which is available every week. I'm also a big fan of nerd culture, including a little bit of comic books, a little bit of anime, but mostly gaming. Big gamer over here. I think that's all.
You're in the right place. You've knocked at the right door. All right, that's my turn, I guess. Hey everyone, my name's Tom. I'm the other half of the Catching Up with the Nerd podcast. Doesn't mean that myself and JC are married. That means that we worked together. See that? That's the office for those who are watching. What do I like? Oh no, wait, I forgot my wife. Like when you go shopping and you forget your wife and your kids in the other aisle. It's the same thing. Anyway, married to a lovely woman named Ellie. We've been together for 20 years very soon. 20 years, can you imagine? Together we've got two kids, one who is 4, a boy obviously named Louis, who is now positively absolutely mad and is going back to school tomorrow, so that's great. Thank you everyone. And the other one whose name Emily, and she's now 11 and a half, and she likes video games just like me. What else am I into? I don't know, comics, a little bit of anime, but mainly video games. All consoles, new consoles, everything you can throw at me that can be played on a screen, I play it. And I think that's it.
And I am Juan Garay. Everybody calls me JC. I'm the other half of the podcast. I am a podcaster, which is the first time I've said that, and it feels weird. But
feels dirty, like saying you're a YouTuber. Ooh.
I know. And I'm here to hand Tom a shovel when he digs himself into those holes, with his wife in particular. Ellie, hope you're not listening. So I also have a wife. Her name is Fiorella, and we've been married for 17 years. I've got 2 kiddos that are 11 and 5, Aiden and Arabelle. And I love my graphic novels, a good nerdy novel. I love everything that's nerdy in shows and movies, and I occasionally dabble in the video game world as well. So welcome back everyone to Catching Up with the Nerds.
Should we jump over to let's go to comics. I attended, I guess you would say, Virtuous Con last weekend, and had the pleasure of meeting a bunch of creators, Black creators that create stuff in the nerd sphere. And I met up with and spoke to an artist called Jordan Jackson. He's created some interesting. He's an artist, I think, first and foremost. He also does some writing, and he's created some really nice posters. I'll put the link in our little Google Drive so that you guys can post it on the description. He's created some posters that are a reinterpretation of African mythological gods and beings. And that's an area that I think is particularly interesting personally, because I've always been into like Greek gods and Roman gods and even Japanese mythology. Like I studied classics at school, and then I've gone on to play a game like Neo, which has a bunch of Japanese mythology and Japanese lore in it. And then I played, what's it called? What's the name of that game? Ubisoft game.
Oh, Assassin's
Creed. They had one a couple of years ago that was set in Egypt. And it went through a lot of Egyptian mythology. And then I was thinking, like, what about like West and East African mythology? Because I know it exists, but I've never heard much about it. Like when people talk about any type of African mythology or African history, it always focuses on Egypt, but everywhere else has its own culture, its own stories, and its own mythology. And he happened to represent some of that through his posters. He takes from Orishas, he takes from a Brazilian mythology or belief system called Candomblé, and then a little bit of Yoruba, which is Nigerian culture, a part of Nigerian culture, and also Santeria, and creates these really interesting posters and pictures that play off of some of the stories of the gods in those different mythologies. He also has his own, if I can find it, I've got way too many tabs open. He also has his own comic book, which I think has had one volume released. Find it.
Whilst you're finding your stuff, it's just a reminder that I miss Comic-Con and all this stuff. I really want this to be back at some point.
Yeah, we need those back for sure.
But the best part is when you could talk to artists and creative people. That was quite interesting. I always thought it was very cool to be able to get to them face to face.
And it's interesting you say that, because when I was at this, I was thinking that if they actually held an event, it would have been in America, and I never would have been able to meet any of these people. But using a platform, I think it's called Remo, they were able to hold a virtual conference. And yeah, there was people from all over, people from the Caribbean. I was there obviously as someone in London. But yeah, there was people from all over the place, and it was awesome just to come together as a community like that. The comic is called Ancient Illumination, Volume 1, Remembrance and Revolt. And the plot is basically I think they've left Earth, and there's an African group of people who have a feud with an organization that operates in space. So it's very much within the nerd sphere. And then he has a second comic called Land of the Wolves, which is a more grounded story, kind of like an e-zine that you can also pick up on his website, that I'll leave a link to. After that, I met a gentleman called TJ Sterling. He let's see here, my notes. He has worked with Marvel at the Marvel bullpen. He's worked with Aspen Comics. He's worked with Dark Horse. He's worked with DC Comics, where he did art for which one was it? Batman Giant issue 5. But in talking to him, he gets he's found it a lot more rewarding to create his own work, create his own comics. So you can buy his comics on a website called Ray Comics, RAE comics.com. And he has a character called Okimus, which I think there's five comic books out, or 5 issues out from that comic. And yeah, it's really interesting artwork. And it's sci-fi martial arts. So it's very much an action-led tale, where I think he finds out that he has these powers, and he's able to use them to help people in his community and things like that. And that's I'm definitely gonna pick up a copy of that. And I recommend anyone that is interested in Black leading comics should too.
Just going back to the first one you mentioned, Ancient Illumination. That was a Kickstarter project, right? So I think that's one of the first link. I mean, the artwork is amazing. I'm trying to put some images or something, but it looks really good. I might try and get it myself. I don't know. It looks tricky to get it.
One of the things to note about this is, like, it's really great, David, you attended this con, because it's at these cons that you're able to actually truly support artists
Yeah.
that are trying to build these narratives on their own terms. Um, Everything we've talked about so far is when we talk about representation and like huge IP like GTA, Star Wars, Star Trek.
Yeah.
To your point, that's just getting foot into the door moment of
Mm.
just like, can we be seen? Right? Can everybody else in the world be seen through the lens of something that everybody loves? But here you get to build a story on your own terms of just like, no, this is a story I want to tell. To your point of like, whether it be incorporating elements of like African mysticism or like just looking at things through a different lens, it just feels like a more original story. And unfortunately, because it's not IP that's already really well known, it's hard to find. It's like to be able to get to a point where you connect with somebody like TJ Sterling on any given day, you'd never hear about him. You'd go to a comic store, you would never find his comic. But by going through these cons, you're able to connect directly and purchase directly from the artist. And that's huge, man, because then we're saying we want not only a diversity in representation, we want diversity in creation of the story, not just like try to get a couple of us in there. It's more like we want original stories about us by us, right? And that makes such a difference, and that's what's important to like support at these cons. It's really huge.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because one of the last talks that I attended at the Virtuous Con was about who was there? There was a few creators there who I think they were writers. There was a couple of people that had stuff made for TV and film. One of them, I think, was an author writing books in the horror sphere, and they were discussing like the practicality of getting things made and being in the writing room, and the difference between making your own project, like a TJ Sterling has done, and working for another company as he's done, working with Marvel and working with DC. And one of the things that he had told me before I attended that talk was that he just got so much, it was so much more rewarding to create his own stuff than it was to take some, like to draw Spider-Man or draw Batman, or they've been drawn 100 times.
Yes.
They've been drawn 100 times. Whereas if you can create something yourself and get that out the door and get that into people's hands and have people give you positive feedback on that, it's way more rewarding. And that was echoed in their statements during that talk, and they spoke a little bit about being in the writing room as the only Black person. And what tends to actually happen is you might come up with an idea, but if the idea is too great, if the idea is too ambitious, it will always get shut down because you're not going to get support from other people in the room. Everyone's sort of clamoring for attention. There will be a hierarchy already in there, and it's difficult to actually get anything done when you're the only Black person in the room, when you're the only person that says, oh, actually, this Black character wouldn't say that or wouldn't act like that. If you're the only Black person in the room, they turn and look at you and go, well, like, what do you mean? Like, I don't get it. And it's like, well, of course you don't get it.
Or they'll argue that it doesn't tie into the story, but then the question isn't, why is the character not behaving that way? The question is like, why is the story written this way then? Right?
Exactly.
It's flipping it upwards of just like, well, if the character wouldn't do this, then there's something wrong with the story. And that's normal writing behavior. You question character development versus plot development back and forth. And it should never be one leading the other. Both complement each other, right? So it's like, if you want to write full characters, then it's got to be a full story as well.
Yes.
So I 100% agree, and I'll use that as a pivot to talk about something that I have secretly wanted to get in this conversation, which is Ta-Nehisi Coates writing Superman.
Yep.
How do we feel about this? Because I've got so many thoughts on it.
Yeah, same. He's a great writer. I recommended his Black Panther book, which is up on my shelf. That's what I looked up. It's an excellent comic. He's an excellent writer. Personally, I find it very difficult for someone to create content for Superman that is compelling just because of how powerful he is. I think the easiest way to make a high quality Superman story is to base it in space or Krypton or some other planet besides Earth. And I get that he's supposed to always save Earth in these stories, but he's just too powerful for the parameters that we have on this planet.
Yeah.
Earth threats are very difficult to do well in a Superman story, in my opinion. So good luck to him. I wouldn't want to be the person trying to make Superman interesting. Just because of how powerful he is. But I mean, it's great for representation. It's great for it's great to have a black person writing a white person's story. I know he's an alien.
Yeah.
If he,
Yeah.
they're talking about having a black Superman also, aren't they?
Yeah, that's
the big thought for me. Yeah, is Superman going to be black?
It would be cool. It would be cool. I mean, just go, before we go back to that, I think this is why. I mean, it's a controversial take on Superman world, but that's why I loved Brightburn. If you guys have ever seen that film, which is the reverse Superman, which is him as a child. Which the take is, what if Superman turns bad? You know, what would happen? I think that was a sweet take. Like I'm always up for that role reversal thing. You know, it's like, what if Batman would be poor? You know, it's the same thing. Sort of thing. Is like, you know, how would he act? How would he do it? I like that weird take on things. So that's why I'm always super open-minded when it comes to, you know, there was the same thing with having a black James Bond. I don't know if you read Daily Mail, they were already ready to burn down the entire country because of that. But I'm like, shit, so what? It's still be fun. As long as the actor is amazing, do it.
But give it up to the French, man. They did it. Lupin is the black James Bond. Like they did it. They had bigger balls than the Broccoli family, because they should have given it to Idris, and I still hope they do. Yeah. But Lupin is what that character should have been. It's just so well written, that character. Outside of, there's a couple of things, but
I ended up watching it last week, so I've gone through it all. It's only 5 episodes long. It's super quick, super fast to go through it.
Yeah, super fun too.
It's super fun. So yeah, it is literally that. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I like the take. I like the flavor that he had, and I like the take, and I like so what? The actor is really good. Just do it, you know. But yeah, I'm sort of hoping he'll be a black Superman. Again, the thing is like, yeah, he's an alien, so he can.
Right. Doesn't really matter what.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like I can to a certain degree understand the James Bond thing. Do you know what I mean? Like I can sort of understand why people are like, well, he's from another sort of period, and it's like he's this. I understand, maybe not the word, but I can hear that debate. I'll be like, okay, fine, I see your point. Like Black Superman, the fact that if it's got any backlash, I'd be like, just get over yourself.
It will. 100% will.
You know, so it's quite interesting. For once, I'd be more than welcoming that take. I think. Dude, why not go with you know, what if Superman ended in or was living in somewhere in Africa? You know, I see that take, that spin on it. You know, why not?
The reason why I find it kind of interesting that it's happening now, and that they pick Coates to do it. I don't know. So to carry on what you said right now, Tom, Miles Morales was difficult for a lot of people to understand why that was important, right? But eventually, it took off because they gave him a proper new storyline. He wasn't becoming the next Spider-Man. He was another Spider-Man with his own set of problems and own origin story that was not Spider-Man's origin story. There was a crossover, of course. But he had agency from the get-go, right? But one of the reasons why he had that agency is because there was the mask. Anybody can wear the mask is one of the things that is always said in Spider-Man comics, right? It's like, that's why Gwen can wear the mask. That's why we have like Penny Parker, all these other characters, right? And with Spider-Man, that's different because he's not wearing a mask, right? and that's where you could get some backlash on it. And that's why I'm curious to see how it gets written, because it's dealing with so many issues right off the top. It's like, one, it's like everybody idealizes like, oh yeah, it's this alien race that's idyllic, so it has to be white, right? First off, that's one thing it's got to contend with. Second, it's got to contend with the fact that it is the most powerful being in the DC universe, right? So it's like, how do you write that character? What do you make that character
ass kicked by Batman, so it's fine. It's not that.
Yeah, exactly. What is that person's hero's journey at the end of the day, right? And one thing that I found interesting that I thought there was a connection to is, like, I don't know if you guys ever heard of, like, there's a Superman comic called Red Sun. Have you guys heard of it?
Yep.
Okay. It's what if Superman was born in the Soviet Union.
Exactly.
And it's a little bit less about Superman and more about how society has embraced that particular character with a different origin story. And off the back of your recommendation, David, I went in and read at least the first volume of Ta-Nehisi Coates' run on Black Panther. And one of the first things that jumped out about that run is that he's not really focusing on T'Challa as a character as much, but he's focusing on like the implications of royalty within Wakanda and democracy and monarchy and what that means for T'Challa, right? And I'm like, oh, that's such an interesting take. And I'm like, I think that's the only way you can make that Superman story interesting, is if it's like, what is the impact on our world if Superman was black? Unless what is the impact on Superman? It's like, what does our world look like? Do we still get George Floyd, right? In a world where Superman's black? Do we still get a defund the police moment? Do we still get Black Lives Matter? Like, how does all this show up if we have a black Superman that clearly, or more so, my assumption would be like, would have interests involved in protecting humanity as a whole and not just looking after white people, right? So that to me is like where I think the character could be very interesting. And I hope it's not him writing a white Superman. I really do hope that it is a black Superman, but it is the implications of it that I'm most interested in.
Yeah, and I think they could actually take from the film we mentioned last episode, where it's a black alien, right? And there are actually weirdly a lot of comparisons to being an alien in America as a black person, as a foreigner, as someone from somewhere else. You don't even have to be black necessarily, but just being a foreigner, excuse me, just being a foreigner who lands on American soil, and being a black person it can be looked at with a lot of similarities. And yeah, that would make it a lot more interesting. Or if they land somewhere else, I like that idea as well, Tom. That is not necessarily set in America. Or this alternate America that DC has.
Fully agree.
Like,
make it African centric. Yep.
Because then you get a different set of morality, a different set of priorities, a different set of what is important. You know, I think to me the most important part, and that's why I like Miles Morales, because we've going back to that, is this, we've seen that story so often. Like, to me, it doesn't matter like who is, if you're just looking at the actors, like the Uncle Ben thing is like, okay, we've done that. It's again going back to Batman. It's the same thing with the parents. Like, yeah, I know they've been shot by someone, and this is how it gets to be Batman. Okay, fine. I don't need to see that again. That's why now, to this point, I welcome any sort of take on it, even if it's a drastic departure from the original material. Actually, I welcome that even more so than if it was another take on. You know, it's like when you watch the first Ben Affleck Batman, and it's like the whole thing with the mother getting shot again. That's like, I instantly rolled my eyes so far back that I was like, I can't take another Batman take when it's like the first scene you see is the mom getting shot and the pearly necklace going rolling, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to see that again. And it was the same thing with Spider-Man. It's like if you look at Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, the older ones, it's like, oh, Uncle Ben is there getting shot. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, it's part of the story, but we've seen that. Yeah. And this is why I like the new Spider-Man also, because it's like this entirely skip that. Well, it's not mentioned, if hardly. Actually, I don't think that the Tom Holland Spider-Man's ever mentioned Uncle Ben. I don't think he's done. He's done that. And that's why I appreciate it also. And it's the same thing with this. Like, so if you can take Spider-Man, rewrite it. Like he could be from anywhere, still from space, but if you can be African centric, that would be cool. I'll be well up for that. As long as Idris Elba is in it, I'm okay with it. Get him in.
My money's on Michael B. Jordan.
Anything with Michael B. Jordan too, I'll take that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see who they cast.
Yeah, so that to me is like ultimately like, how do you make it interesting? And given the time we're going through, right? If there's no social commentary on it, they missed a trick. If they got Coates to do it and there's no social commentary, like they missed a trick. And the last thing I'll say about it is like, I'd also love to see something like a different origin story, to your point, Tom, that builds a different morality into Superman, right? Whereas like he was born very much in like Christian upbringing on a field with like Superman was there to like defend capitalism in the American way, right? What if he's not? What if he was born during like colonial period in Africa, where it's like you're fighting off colonials, right? It's like that's how you're helping people to show up, and like your religion is based on African religions, right? It's not like Judeo-Christian in any way. It's like, who do you get as a character? Because you then get to sidestep all like, well, what does that mean for like the Daily Planet? What does it mean for Lois? What does it mean for Lex Luthor? Like, are you just gonna like making everyone black? And I was like, well, then yes, that helps for his representation, but it doesn't give him agency in his story. Like you want him to have his own story he builds up. And the other one that I thought of is like, if you guys get a chance to check it out, there's it's the comic, but they made it into one of the DC animated movies called All-Star Superman. And it's self-contained. It doesn't tie into canon, but it's basically a story of Superman's last run. And he knows he's dying. He finally finds out something happens to him. Actually, it happens in the first like 5 pages, not a big spoiler. He has to save somebody that's going to crash into the sun. And by virtue of that, he absorbs too much energy from the sun, and it makes the cells mutate and they begin to die. And he knows this. And it's like what are the last actions that Superman takes on Earth when he knows he's about to die? Is just such a great story because it humanizes the character, and it doesn't ground it in, and he came from the farm and and all this and that stuff. It's just like, what do you do when you're in that situation? His morality has changed because he's no longer the defender. He's trying to think about legacy. So his moral compass is different. And that's what I want from that Superman. It's like a different moral compass. So we'll see how it rolls, but at least it's ballsy to announce it, and I'm glad they did. And
is that anywhere to be? Is that actually printed, or is it an actual?
Yeah, you can. It's the Grant Morrison run. So it's All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison. But you can also, I caught it on HBO Max, where they have all the DC. Well, not all, but a lot of the DC animated movies. So wherever you find DC animated movies, hopefully it should be there. If not, bootleg.
No, we'll never do that.
No one said that.
Could I bring the focus to some women?
Yeah. Yes.
Well, back to women, I guess, because we had some of those earlier with the Star Trek stuff. So I'm at the conference and I'm like, okay, I've got these interesting artists and comic book creators, but these are all men. Let's see what's out there for women and girls. And I came across an author called Miracle Austin, and she has created a series called Doll. I think it's a 3-part series in the YA genre, and it also ties in some sci-fi elements, but it's very much like a teen drama where the teenagers are growing up and dealing with all the things they have to grow up with, but then it also involves some sci-fi elements. So it has a little bit of horror involved, and there are people with powers and things like that. And that's a 3-part book series so far anyway. I think she's working on continuing it. And I'll put a link again to her work in the doc. So she was really interesting to talk to. She also has an anthology of unrelated stories, but they all have sort of personal messages throughout them. And she described it as something that she created to sort of send messages to herself or to capture things that she's thought about over the years, called Boundless, the Boundless Anthology, which is also on her website. Going from books to animation.
Nice.
Yep.
We've talked about quite a fair bit off the podcast about the Marvel Rising series.
Yep.
Yes.
And that has a series of shorts and also a movie which is accessible on Disney Plus right now, which tells the story of a few young Marvel characters. I think Spider-Gwen's in there, but there is Ironheart, an Ironheart story, and also a Shuri short story, which is excellent because, again, it's a representation of not just black men as we saw in San Andreas and the black male actors that were in Star Trek and all these other things, Star Wars, but black females. And for it to be in a cartoon where young kids can watch and see themselves represented in a nerd culture sphere, but from a very, very young age. And I think that's important to have that representation as well.
And going back quickly to Shuri and Ironheart, like these are two characters I really want to read and know more about, because I know Ironheart, she'll be at some point, she'll be in the I don't know if she's gonna have her own series, or she'll be introducing the Marvel in the MCU.
Yeah, she's gonna get her own series.
Yeah. But Shuri, I think she's so underused in the MCU. She deserves more space. Like every time she's on screen, you're either laughing or actually no, 100% of the time you're just laughing at everything she says and the way she's putting down everybody. Yes, I think I find it so absolutely funny, and she's. I think she definitely deserves a series or a movie that is more centered around her, as a main character. And again, I think we talked about that in another episode when we said like she should take over the Black Panther role. I think there's so much room for her to grow into that role, and it would be so interesting to have that as a main character. Have her as a main character. That'd be great.
She has in the comics. She actually has taken on the Black Panther role, and I'm actually just right now I'm reading Nnedi Okorafor's run on Shuri, and it's I'm curious where it's going to go, but from the beginning of what I've started to read right now, I hate to say it, but actually I'm enjoying it a little bit more than the Ta-Nehisi Coates run on Black Panther, in that it's trying to find what the purpose of Shuri is in that world, right? It's exploring that, and it's taken a note from the Black Panther run that Coates worked on, and that they reference the difference between like a monarchy and a democracy, and it's starting to arise like Shuri's actually standing for democracy, because she has a moment. It's in the first couple of pages in the comics, so I'm not giving too much away. But like T'Challa goes into space. It's actually a really cool moment where like they said, like Wakanda has their own space shuttle, which of course they would, right? But they actually comment on the fact like we were late to the space race, but now we're the leaders of the space race. It's like they're taking just like casual voyages, like on like a Tuesday. It's like no big deal, just going into space and stuff. And T'Challa goes into a wormhole. With a mutant with him, which is the I forget his name, but it's the mutant that basically like it sounds like Shuri's kind of in love with the mutant. Anyways, so they go into a wormhole and they don't come back for about 2 weeks, and then this group of women come to Shuri and say like, you mistake up the Black Panther persona while T'Challa's out, and she refuses it. She's like, no, I think we need to step away from the patriarchy. And like stepping into this one person over and over again. And actually during this time, how does the country show up to protect ourselves, right? Well, Black Panther's not here. It's about us as a democracy versus like still the royals doing this for us. So it's leaning into still that royals versus democracy moment, but it's putting Shuri on the side of democracy, which I'm like, that I like where you're going with it. Like I really, really enjoyed that, because she has such great points of view in how she's going through that journey. So far I'm excited. So if you get a chance to pick it up, it's super nice run that she's on.
That sounds awesome. Yeah, putting her there as a revolutionary essentially.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting that the most technologically advanced civilization on Earth still has a monarchy running
Correct.
It's almost doesn't make sense.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and Letitia Wright, obviously in the MCU, has done excellent things with that role, and I do hope that she takes on that mantle of the Black Panther.
And when I say she should grow into that role, I'm not saying she should be Black Panther as in like with the same. I think they should have their own spin and maybe going the same route that JC was just mentioning now. No, I'm not saying it should be with the same costume and the same powers and all that stuff. No, she should have her own spin on it. Yeah. Taking his role, his position, and maybe shaking
as a leader.
As a leader.
DC Comics have a new comic which you could pre-order at the Virtuous Con called Nubia, real one, which should be out very soon actually. But they I think it's quite a grounded comic. I think it's based in and around like her neighborhood and her life as a young Black woman. But it has an interesting art style. And I recommend people pick that up as soon as that's available.
It's available now. Just checking it.
There you go.
It's ready to go. So get it.
And that's a grounded story around a young Black woman, and you can tell from the art, you can tell from the hairstyle, you can tell from her nails and the way that they've portrayed her that she is a modern Black woman, and that just so rarely gets portrayed in comic books. Period.
She's got a Wonder Woman T-shirt on the front cover.
Well, wasn't Nubia Wonder Woman's sister? In
that sounds familiar.
Canon back in the day, I feel like there's
maybe there's a spin on that, right?
No, it is. Okay. It is.
She's got the
the cuffs, the cuff.
Yep. She's Wonder, which is another interesting one. Was like you were put all these Amazons on an island to like protect Earth. Like, would you make them all white? Really? It's like that wouldn't happen, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually one of the first thing I remember from watching especially now in the most recent Wonder Woman films. It's like, hey, look, they're from Amazonian ladies, apart from the main actress who's from Israel and super white. But hey, if you can point on the map where the Amazon is. Oh God! Yeah,
that bending over backwards to make it non-diverse, right? Yeah. And then
let me just read one line. Very interesting. That I think this would probably sum it up. And if they're going down this path, I think it's fascinating. It says in the description for the book, Nubia has always been different. As a baby, she showcased Amazonian strength by pushing over a tree to rescue her brother's cat. But despite Nubia's similar abilities to Wonder Woman, the world has no problem telling her she's no Wonder Woman. And that is interesting, because whereas Wonder Woman showed up and she's like, hey, I'm a Greek goddess. Everybody believes it because look at me. I'm white and I'm like really good looking and stuff. It's like, what if you had the same premise, a strong, beautiful Amazonian woman that happens to be Black, and why is she told she can't do it? Right? If that's where they go, that's very interesting.
Even the next line is even worse. Like, and even if she was, they wouldn't want her. That's like, oh, shit.
Yeah. And that reminds me of Sam Wilson's Captain America. Like from the beginning of that storyline, it's made very, very clear that people do not want to accept a Black Captain America in America. Like, he can do all the saving and all the helping he wants, but people do not want to accept the idea that the country is represented by a Black man. And I think that's a really interesting take, and I'm glad that they're doing this here with a Black woman as well.
And that's partly a reason why I'm really looking forward to the Falcon and Winter Soldier series coming out soon. As I want to see how they progress from that ending from Endgame. If they are fully giving him the Captain America treatment, or if it's going to be, it's going to be back and forth between being still Falcon in the open and being Captain America in the,
well, and also
hiding.
will he want it, right?
Like when he
sees reaction, will he want to continue doing it?
Yeah. That's that. It'll be interesting. I think that's one of the main thing I'll be looking out for. in that series.
Yeah.
But man, I think I might pick it up, Nubia. I might actually go and spend my cash.
Yeah, that looks really good, actually.
Yeah.
I like the art
I
style
read
also.
after sure.
I always go on about the art style, but that looks really cool.
Yeah.
There's a preview if you go on the DC Comics website.
Yeah.
DCcomics.com. You can check out the first 5 pages.
Yep.
And it looks good. It looks good.
Yeah. Just wanted to squeeze
in
in
two
before we
Go
head out. So I wanted to give almost a shout out to Storm and her character in not only the X-Men comics, or the X-Men cartoon. But yeah, throughout the comics, the movies, I think she has been one stalwart in nerd culture in terms of having Black women represented. And you could always point to her as being, at least in my lifetime, point to her as being someone who was who had a prominent role in a whatever medium it was in Marvel. Even when stuff like Black Panther and other characters were put on the back burner, the black back burner, and like before Blade was brought back and things like that, like she's always been there in some way, shape, or form. And then I just wanted to finish with a game actually that Tom didn't bring up. I'm not sure if you've played it actually. We haven't spoken about it. I haven't played it, but Uncharted Lost Legacy.
No, so I had it on my list.
Okay.
I had it on my list. I don't know why I took it off my list, but yes, go on. It's one of my favorite games also.
Just as I said, I haven't played it, but it's a Uncharted game which is largely story led. It always deals with and delves into the characters quite deeply, what their motives are, what their origins are, how they feel, what they think, and it pairs two female leads, which is again very rare for a computer game, and then for one of them to be Black and have their story told through the medium and the journey that they go on, I think is really interesting and a really excellent thing to kind of end the series on, for now at least.
Yeah, Lost Legacy is it's really a great game because it's a side story to the Uncharted storyline, and it's really great. I mean, it's almost to the point where it's probably the one I enjoyed the most, because it wasn't featuring Nate. Nate being the main character, who's this uber friendly, super nice guy that spends 4 games murdering half of the world's population, but still by cracking up jokes, you're like, that's funny. But then he just murdered 50 people, right? So it's quite this weird relationship with him. But Uncharted is loosely, not even loosely. It's very much borrowing from the Indiana Jones world story. So it's the same thing. It's just a dude going around the world trying to get. Well, it differs a bit, but he's looking for treasures and get that cash money in there. And Lost Legacy, yes, is 2 side characters that are being brought forward, and the 2 of them are women, and they are again very different from one another, and the relationship, the dynamics between them makes the entire game very compelling, and it's again uber cheap to buy. So it's one of those great games that flew under the radar, I think. I feel, and deserves more recognition, because that's really great, and that it shows that women can be leaders, or can be the forefront of a story and be badasses, but also I don't know. It's just to me. I keep thinking about it. I'm trying to remember the whole story now, and it definitely deserves to be more known. I think that one. I can't remember what it was. I think they're in India and they're going around the world, like Madagascar, and like the typical piratey place. Graphically, it looks awesome if you play it again. Do we have anything else, JC? Do you have another one to add?
No, just a comment on. I'm glad you brought up Storm. And we, my son and I are just starting a rewatch of the X-Men movies because I was convinced we were getting X-Men during WandaVision. I'm like, Aiden, we got to rewatch the X-Men movies. So you know what we're talking about. You know who Pietro is. And I was like, I won't discuss my letdown over that, but in just rewatching the first X-Men, it's like, oh my God, the Storm character is like just almost like comically underwritten. Like she has like 5 lines in the whole movie. It's tragic, like how much they have underwritten the character, given that Storm led the X-Men at one point, like in the comics. Like it wasn't like, oh yeah, she's always been kind of a side character. No, she's been a main character. Like her and T'Challa have a relationship. So I'd totally forgotten about that until I was reading the Shuri comment, the Shuri comic, and Storm shows up to like counsel Shuri. And because she's like, oh, I heard T'Challa's away, I'm concerned, blah blah blah, and just there's so much they could do. So I'm hoping that now that Disney has the rights, that they'll do justice by that character, because I think there's definitely like a justice for Storm moment coming, that we need to get a better version of Storm.
I mean, yeah, the funny thing is, Storm is one of the most fun. It's my favorite character of the X-Men. Like I cannot stand Logan. Good. I cannot stand Wolverine, and it's played by the actor that I cannot stand. So it's the whole package. I'm like, can't stand you. And the whole story of the first X-Men is all based around him. Yeah, and I watched it last week, and I was like, oh, come on, we're moving on. But Storm is like, she's got so much more potential. It's so much more interesting what she can do, I think. And it's got Hailey Berry in there. It's like, why would you want that?
Yeah, to cast someone so big, and then
exactly. It's like being a second or third rate character in the background. It's like and especially one of the first thing you see is Wolverine driving a truck, and then they crash, and then they get saved by Storm and what's his face, laser dude,
Cyclops.
And it's like the first badass scene in the entire film. It's her lining up everyone, and it's like, oh my God, that's awesome, I want to see more. And then it's like, next time you see her, she's just standing next to Cyclops. Oh yeah, that's Storm, by the way. Whoa, she doesn't even say anything. And that was it. That's it. That's Storm. When she gets you see her at the end again, but it's like,
and that's what you get when you have someone writing for movies that didn't write for comics, right? Because anybody that knew anything about comics would understand that the X-Men have always have been a comment on civil rights, right? Exactly. It's like that's and to then underwrite one of the Black characters within that group is so ridiculous. Hopefully
it's something that happened then that wouldn't happen today, right? Correct. They would do their due diligence and make sure they give them their proper their proper
introduction and development, right?
Exactly.
Cool. I think we've done well. I think we've reached the end of the end. Right. What shall we say now?
Cool. So we'll take us out. So everyone out there, this is the 3rd episode of our Black History Month series. We will be back for a 4th episode to talk about Afrofuturism, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, rate, review, subscribe, follow us, go to Instagram, do all the things where Tom is waiting for you to show up, and he's going to say, like me, please, so that we can get more likes. So thank you for tuning in. And thank you very much for Dave for showing up again and helping us out with this series. It's awesome to have like a third person here to talk about this, and to just basically, so we can like just come at it from so many different perspectives. So thank you for joining, dude.
You're welcome, and I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please like, share, and subscribe. Goodbye.
Wakanda forever.